Hello, and welcome to Midnight Tales, a space where everyone can immerse themselves in peace and enchantment before drifting off to sleep. Tonight, we'll explore another captivating story that invites calm and lightness, helping you rest and recharge. But first, let's take a moment to gently prepare our bodies and minds for a soothing, restorative night's sleep. Make yourself comfortable, and with each slow inhale and long exhale, allow any cares from the day to slip away. It's not always easy to detach from the hustle and mental overload, especially before bed. However, remember this: the less we worry about how quickly we'll fall asleep, the easier it is for our minds to release any tension. Let the rhythm of your breathing carry away lingering worries, and let the story you're about to hear guide you into deep relaxation. Now, close your eyes and allow the magical atmosphere to softly envelop you. Enjoy the story, and may you find peaceful, restful sleep here on Midnight Tales. In the chilly, enchanting northern lands, a gentle woodcutter lived with his beloved daughter, Daria. She filled his days with happiness, but as time passed, he yearned for companionship once more. Understanding her father's wishes, Daria welcomed a new stepmother and a stepsister named Maria, hoping to find friendship in their company. Yet the peace of their woodland home was fleeting. The envious stepmother, feeling overshadowed by Daria's beauty and grace, grew increasingly resentful. Despite Daria's attempts to win her favor, she found herself facing constant criticism. Fortunately for Daria, she had a steadfast companion in Victor, a large dog gifted to her by her father. Though he bore a resemblance to a wolf, Victor was gentle and fiercely loyal to Daria. When her father set off on a journey to trade wood for supplies, she bid him farewell with Victor by her side. Dreading the solitude that awaited her in his absence, as he rode away, her stepmother and stepsister paid little mind to his departure. The day passed slowly as everyone engaged in their own chores with minimal conversation. However, Daria's stepmother was quietly plotting to take advantage of her husband's absence and concocted a scheme to rid herself of Daria once and for all. As the afternoon waned and the early winter sun began its descent, Daria found solace in reading up in her loft. Her peaceful moment was abruptly interrupted by a ruckus coming from the kitchen below. Curious about the commotion, she hurried down the stairs. The front door stood ajar, allowing the cold air to sweep through their home as her stepmother fretted anxiously, twisting her hands together. "Daria!" she cried out dramatically. The wind blew the door open, and Victor has run away. Scanning the room for any sign of him, usually curled up by the warmth of the stove, Daria quickly realized he was nowhere to be found. Without hesitation, Daria wrapped herself in a woolen shawl and rushed outside, calling out for Victor. She searched every nook and cranny of their small homestead, but found no trace of him. Returning to the front door, she asked her stepmother if she had seen which direction he had gone. With a sly gesture towards the path leading into the depths of the woods, her stepmother deceitfully urged her on. "Hurry now. You might still catch him." Without taking a moment to put on warmer clothing, Daria dashed down the path, her heart set on finding Victor and bringing him back to the safety of their home. As she vanished into the shadows, her stepmother closed the door behind her, sharing a knowing smile with Maria. They opened the pantry door to discover Victor comfortably seated inside, happily finishing a stack of pancakes, completely unaware of Daria's frantic calls. Delighted by their clever trick, Maria and her mother chuckled as Victor, noticing Daria's absence, sniffed curiously at the front door. They settled down to savor the remaining pancakes fresh from the oven. Meanwhile, deep within the woods, Daria continued her search for Victor. Lost in her thoughts and oblivious to the encroaching nightfall, she pressed on without considering that Victor, being a sturdy northern dog, could likely find his way home on his own. Perhaps it would have been wiser to wait until morning. She could have at least grabbed a heavier coat. Yet who could blame her for wanting to find her best friend so urgently? She reassured herself that if she just turned around the next bend or called out a bit louder, he would come bounding toward her. In this way, she wandered too far. By the time she realized she was lost and far from home, darkness had already fallen. Soon enough, Daria found herself trudging aimlessly through the twilight, over tangled roots, around large boulders, and beneath drooping branches while calling for Victor. But deep down, she feared that her beloved dog was nowhere nearby. As the forest grew darker with each passing moment, it dawned on her that seeking some form of shelter and waiting until dawn would be the wisest decision. Eventually, she stumbled upon a small clearing surrounded by tightly packed evergreen trees. Slipping beneath their drooping branches for protection, she wrapped her shawl more snugly around herself. This little refuge offered some respite from the chilly wind, as moonlight filtered through the trees and illuminated her surroundings. It wasn't perfect, but it would have to do for now, she thought. Leaning against a sturdy tree trunk, she began to drift off into slumber. Suddenly, something strange happened. The air around her grew noticeably colder, stirring her from her drowsy state. A tingling sensation danced across her nose as whispers seemed to swirl through the forest around her. Turning to glance behind her, she sensed an unseen presence. Or perhaps it was merely a change in the atmosphere itself. When she turned back toward the clearing once more, she could hardly believe what she saw. Standing a short distance away was a tall figure. At first, she couldn't quite make out who the figure was, as he waved his arm gracefully from side to side. As he moved, the air around him sparkled with tiny, glimmering particles that danced from his fingertips on the gentle breeze. Wherever they landed, on branches or the forest floor, a magical transformation took place. Vibrant green leaves and grass turned into a pristine blanket of white. It was as if he were a painter, breathing new life into the woodland. Captivated, she watched as he appeared to notice her for the first time. He paused his mysterious work and looked at her with a mix of surprise and curiosity. Daria found herself momentarily speechless. She was completely taken aback by his striking appearance. Sensing her silence, he crossed his arms and studied her thoughtfully, pondering what to say next. Then, shaking his head as if coming to a conclusion, he spoke. "Well, miss," he began kindly, "you can't stay here. I'm about to envelop this entire forest in a deep winter chill, and it won't be pleasant for sleeping." At last, Daria managed to find her voice and assured him she didn't mean to intrude. After all, being lost in the woods again felt far worse than simply feeling cold. She dreaded the thought of wandering through the darkness once more. The man raised an eyebrow skeptically as he brushed off some stray frost from his trousers. He regarded her for a moment before shrugging lightly. "Very well then," he said with a hint of resignation. "I really do have quite a lot to accomplish tonight." Daria nodded earnestly, wrapping her shawl tighter around herself and tucking her feet further beneath her skirt. Trying to muster some bravery, she replied cheerfully, "Good luck. I'll just settle back down for a bit." He stepped away toward a deeper part of the clearing, but glanced back at her several times as if hesitating. Then he spread his arms wide once more, and the enchanting display of winter magic resumed. Under the glow of the moonlight, it seemed as though diamonds blanketed the forest floor, and every nearby surface sparkled with brilliance. But oh, the temperature dropped significantly. Daria fought to maintain her courage against the growing chill. It was becoming very cold indeed. Her chin began to tremble as shivers coursed through her body, and soon enough, her teeth began to chatter softly. The tall, striking stranger paused in the midst of his work, turning to gaze at Daria. He halted abruptly once more, striding toward her with purpose. "Miss," he said kindly, "you're clearly not dressed for winter's chill, and I fear this evening will grow even colder. Perhaps you should make your way home to a warm fire." Daria's expression fell as she nodded slowly, reluctantly sharing that she had lost her way while searching for her dog and didn't know how to return home. Upon hearing this, the man's demeanor softened into a friendly smile. He bowed deeply and introduced himself. "I am King Frost. I rule over the northern realms, and sometimes even bring my frosty touch to those in warmer lands." With a playful wink, he added, "People here often overlook me, but those in the south find me quite remarkable." Daria returned his smile with a curtsy of her own as she introduced herself. Yet even as she put forth her best manners, the Frost King noticed that she appeared pale and frail. Understanding that she would need assistance to endure the night in his icy forest, he gestured for her to follow him. "My sleigh is just ahead," he said. "Inside, there are warm blankets and refreshments that will help revive you. Come, let me guide you there." Feeling thankful for his kindness, Daria trailed a few steps behind him as they crossed the clearing. Her leather shoes sank into the soft snow, and she marveled at how this place had been green just moments before. Her attention shifted when she caught sight of a gleaming white sleigh nestled beneath the towering trees. It was hitched to a pure white horse, and its silver runners sparkled brilliantly in the moonlight. creating a scene so enchanting it felt almost like a dream. With a flourish, the Frost King opened the door to the sleigh and bowed graciously, inviting her inside. Daria approached with caution, but expressed her heartfelt thanks before settling onto an opulent red velvet seat draped with cozy woolen blankets. She eagerly wrapped herself up, trying to warm her face and hands against the cold. As she looked up, she watched in awe as the Frost King snapped his fingers, summoning a silver tray with a steaming mug of mulled cider from thin air. With a soft gasp of joy, she accepted the mug from him, and he beamed with delight. Leaning against the sleigh door as if ready for a chat, he furrowed his attractive brow in thought and asked how she had found herself lost so deep in the forest all alone. As she savored the warm cider, Daria began to share the tale of her loyal dog, Victor, who had slipped out of their cottage and vanished into the woods. The Frost King listened intently before asking her to describe her home. Was it large or small, made of stone or wood? Did it have a garden with a fence, or perhaps a chicken coop? Daria painted a vivid picture of their snug wooden house with its sharply sloping roof, gesturing gracefully as she spoke of the beautifully carved details around the windows that her father had crafted. She described their yard, which boasted a kitchen garden, a hay shed, and a quaint barn, all enclosed by a charming woven wooden fence. As she illustrated her home in his mind, he couldn't help but smile at her affection for it, knowing exactly where it lay. With a playful wink, he pulled out an elegantly wrapped box from behind his back and presented it to her. "I have 2 pieces of wonderful news," he announced. "The first is that these are the most delightful chocolates you will ever taste." Daria felt herself blush as she accepted the box and lifted the lid, marveling at the exquisite treats nestled inside. The Frost King continued, "The second piece of good news is that I know where your house is, and I will take you back home." Overcome with happiness, Daria clapped her hands together and placed the box in her lap. She thanked him profusely before graciously offering him one of the chocolates. He took it with pleasure, savoring its sweetness for a moment before settling beside her in the sleigh. Daria had expected him to feel cold to the touch. Instead, he radiated an indescribable warmth. He was both dazzling and comforting at once. As he urged the horse onward and the sleigh glided smoothly along, she stole sidelong glances at him. Until that evening, winter had always seemed harsh and bleak to her. However, meeting the Frost King had transformed her view entirely. Nestling deeper into her cozy seat and relishing the sensation of their swift journey through the snow-laden landscape, she felt his presence acutely. Her feelings were not icy. They were filled with joy and warmth. Time seemed to slip away from her as the sleigh ride transformed into an enchanting journey through a dreamlike realm. The trees appeared to graciously lift their branches in reverence as the Frost King glided past, while the forest filled with the gentle sound of countless tinkling bells. The snow and ice he had crafted sparkled like precious jewels, adorning every inch of the landscape with a touch of magic. The brilliant moonlight served as a perfect companion, illuminating everything in its silvery glow. The Frost King turned out to be a wonderful companion throughout their adventure. He sang joyful melodies, shared captivating stories of his thrilling escapades, and kindly asked about her life as a woodcutter's daughter, though she felt her own tales paled in comparison to his remarkable experiences. She shared them nonetheless. She spoke of her father, stepmother, and stepsister, recounting their life together at the homestead. While these details seemed ordinary to her, she cherished the connection they created through conversation. The Frost King was charmed by her genuine spirit and found great joy in her stories. Most notably, he admired her appreciation for the simple life amidst the challenges of the northern lands he ruled. Eventually, the soft sound of the sleigh gliding through the snowy forest faded as they approached her home's yard. Daria felt a twinge of sadness. What had begun as an anxious evening had blossomed into one of the most magical nights of her life. As she stepped from the sleigh, the Frost King opened the door wide and extended his hand toward her. "Be careful, mind your step," he said with a warm smile. "It seems someone has covered your entire garden in ice and snow." Daria let out a soft chuckle while she began to remove the beautiful woolen blanket draped over her shoulders. No, keep it," he urged gently. "Think of it as a gift from me to you." Blushing at his kindness, she nodded appreciatively as he added, "It might be useful during your next nighttime venture into the woods." When Daria opened her front door, she was greeted by Victor, sitting there, eagerly wagging his tail. It dawned on her that he must have returned home while she was away, a thought that warmed her heart as she buried her face in his soft fur and embraced him tightly. As she stood up and carefully closed the door behind her, she stole a glance through the crack just in time to see the Frost King commanding his majestic horse away from her yard. As he departed, it seemed to her that he winked once more before disappearing into the night. Daria's stepmother and stepsister put on an elaborate show of joy upon her return, feigning concern as if they had spent the entire night worrying. In truth, the stepmother was secretly displeased that Daria had returned, especially with such an incredible story to share. She might have dismissed it as a figment of imagination, if not for the stunning blanket now in Daria's possession, its exquisite craftsmanship hinting at a considerable value. Later that evening, the woodcutter arrived home and listened to his daughter's tale with a touch of skepticism. Yet his primary emotion was one of relief. The news of Daria's escapades in the forest had greatly troubled him, and he found it hard to believe that Victor would recklessly venture into the woods like that. With a firm look at the dog, he admonished him not to add to his mistress's worries, and insisted that Victor stop begging for pancakes by the stove. Sitting patiently by the oven, Victor tilted his head and appeared genuinely sorry. As life settled back into its familiar rhythm and winter enveloped the land as anticipated, Daria felt a shift within herself. She began to daydream often and entertain thoughts that were once foreign to her. Before her journey into the forest, she had never imagined a life beyond the simple cottage she called home. However, her encounter with the Frost King had opened her eyes to wonders she had never considered. At night, she dreamt of his warm smile and contemplated the enchanting places he might be exploring. She found herself curious about the marvels unfolding under his majestic command. Several weeks after their meeting, Daria opened her front door one morning after a heavy snowstorm had blanketed everything overnight. To her astonishment, she discovered a beautifully wrapped box resting on the doorstep, adorned with glimmering silver paper and tied with a soft green velvet bow. Carefully bringing the package inside, she unwrapped it with great care, ensuring not to tear the exquisite paper. When she lifted the lid, her eyes widened at the sight of a magnificent velvet cloak nestled inside. The royal blue fabric was embellished with delicate silver snowflake embroidery, instantly captivating her stepsister and stepmother, who couldn't resist running their fingers over its luxurious texture. Draping the cloak around herself, Daria leaned in to savor its softness against her cheek before hugging it tightly to her chest, overwhelmed with delight. She knew that the cloak was a precious gift from the Frost King. While the cloak itself was truly enchanting, it was his fond thoughts of her that filled her heart with the most happiness. The arrival of such a lavish present stirred irritation in her stepmother, who ordered Daria to stow away the foolish cape and concentrate on her chores instead. Furthermore, she commanded Daria to clear the entire front walkway of snow, a particularly spiteful task given the biting cold and lack of urgency. Nevertheless, Daria's cheerful spirit remained untouched as she donned her old coat and set about her work, almost as if in a dream. The Frost King had returned to her life once more. Throughout the long winter, days and nights drifted by in monotony. The northern landscape was desolate, with no neighbors nearby to visit or entertain the woodcutter and his family. Yet he found contentment in his home and labor, while Daria nourished herself with hopeful thoughts of perhaps meeting the Frost King again someday. As time passed, her stepsister and stepmother's jealousy grew ever stronger. Tensions escalated after a heavy snowfall when yet another unexpected gift arrived for Daria. At dawn, as snowdrifts enveloped their cottage, she opened the door to find a second present, wrapped in shimmering gold paper, adorned with a wide ribbon. Bringing this exquisite treasure inside, Daria carefully unwrapped it before her family once again. Her father watched from his cozy spot by the stove, while her stepsister and stepmother leaned forward eagerly to catch a glimpse of what lay within. Inside the box were the softest, most beautifully crafted boots any of them had ever seen, lavishly embroidered with vibrant designs and lined with warm wool. Daria slipped off one sock and eased her foot into one of those lovely boots, delighting in its luxurious softness. They fit her perfectly, as if they had been custom made just for her. Lost in her blissful moment, she hardly noticed her stepmother's rising irritation. But soon enough, the woman could no longer hold back her feelings. "Well," she said sharply, "Maria, my daughter, you must go into the forest. Find out what marvelous gifts your stepsister receives from this Frost King she has met. Let him rescue you too, and you shall be showered with even more splendid and extravagant treasures." Maria gazed at her mother in disbelief. Surely she couldn't mean to send her out into the frigid air on such a pointless errand, Maria thought. Yet her determined mother was unwavering. She instructed the woodcutter to take Maria into the woods without a coat and leave her there. Daria and her father tried to persuade the stepmother to reconsider her plan, but she remained resolute. Later that afternoon, he reluctantly loaded his stepdaughter onto his sled and journeyed into the forest, uncertain of where exactly to leave her. As he prepared to depart, he offered her his coat, assuring her he wouldn't be gone long and advising her to stay safe until morning. Maria turned down his gift, claiming it smelled like a horse, and that soon she would be showered with gifts from the Frost King. Unable to change her mind, the sorrowful man shook his head and made his way home. Meanwhile, Maria stood alone in a clearing amidst the trees, stamping her feet and clapping her hands together in eager anticipation of meeting the Frost King. She adopted a helpless tone and called out for help. Unfortunately, no majestic figure appeared before her. All she managed to do was frighten away any nearby wildlife. As night fell, frustration began to creep in. Where was her savior with his splendid gifts and warm drinks? Why hadn't he come for her as he had for Daria? No amount of fussing seemed to summon him, and soon tears of self-pity streamed down her cheeks as she huddled beneath a pine bough for shelter. Just as she was about to turn back homeward, she heard the jingle of harness bells drawing near. To her astonishment, an exquisite white sleigh emerged, drawn by a magnificent white horse. And seated within it was none other than the Frost King. She felt certain of it. She had never laid eyes on such an extraordinarily handsome man. He was everything Daria had described, and more. Eager not to be overlooked, Maria dashed into the path of his sleigh, ready to play the role of damsel in distress. He halted the horse and regarded her with curiosity. "What brings you out here alone in this winter wonderland?" he asked, raising an eyebrow in surprise. With a charming smile that she hoped would captivate him, Maria danced lightly from one foot to the other as she explained her predicament. She was lost and terribly cold. "Could you possibly help me?" she asked, her voice sweet and pleading. The Frost King took a moment to contemplate her words, gazing up at the sky as if weighing her request. "I have much to attend to in the woods tonight," he replied thoughtfully, "but you may accompany me for a while. Once I'm done, I will ensure you make it back home safely." Unfazed by the thought of interrupting his duties, Maria eagerly tugged at the door of his sleigh, signaling her desire to climb aboard. With a flick of his wrist, he opened it for her, though a hint of reluctance flickered across his face. Disappointed not to be treated like royalty as she had imagined, she seized the opportunity and stepped inside. Wrapping herself snugly in the luxurious blanket that lay waiting, she secretly hoped it would accompany her home. After all, this was where Daria's exquisite woolen wrap had originated. As their journey commenced, Maria cleared her throat with an air of significance. The Frost King halted the horse and turned to her with a look of quiet patience. Sensing something was amiss, he asked what troubled her. In a sugary tone, she replied, "Will you not offer me some refreshment?" A knowing expression flickered across the Frost King's face, as if he had just unraveled the truth about her intentions. Then, with a playful glint in his eye, he produced a simple cup of hot water and a slice of bread. Presenting them on a plate, he encouraged her to enjoy the meal. Maria felt quite dissatisfied. This was not at all the treatment she had envisioned. Had she braved the freezing woods only to be treated like an ordinary girl? No, she thought crossly. That was certainly not what she had expected. As the sleigh continued on its path, she cleared her throat again. "How long will your work take?" she asked petulantly. "I'm feeling rather cold and wish to return home." The Frost King didn't even glance in her direction as he replied calmly, "Indeed, young lady, I've just realized that getting you home is now my priority, since I doubt we will relish each other's company for much longer." With a hint of irony in his voice, he added, "I believe I know the way to your house." Maria was taken aback by his indifferent tone and felt a wave of disappointment wash over her. As he swiftly turned the sleigh towards her cottage, she sank beneath the blanket in a sulky mood. Her mother would surely be displeased when she returned empty-handed. The Frost King graciously set Maria down at the cottage, but without any formal goodbyes, he vanished from the yard before she could even grasp the doorknob. Once inside, only her stepfather and Daria expressed relief at her safe return. Maria's mother, however, felt a twinge of disappointment that her encounter with the Frost King had been so fleeting. Her discontent grew as she realized Maria had returned empty-handed. Even the blanket she had used during her sleigh ride had disappeared along with him. In contrast, Daria felt a wave of relief wash over her. She was thankful that Maria had made it back from the frosty woods unscathed, but secretly delighted that the Frost King had not shown her sister the same favor. Daria treasured the memories of their conversations and the gifts he had bestowed upon her. She refused to believe that he offered such treasures to every young girl who wandered into the forest. Life at their home settled back into its familiar winter rhythm. No more fierce storms rolled in, and spring seemed just around the corner. Yet this year, Daria felt differently about the arrival of spring. She understood that with winter's end would come the conclusion of her visits from the Frost King, leaving her with an unusual sense of melancholy. But fate had a surprise in store for Daria. After weeks of warming temperatures, April brought an unexpected twist. One morning, the family awoke to find a heavy snowfall blanketing everything outside. Frost adorned the windows, and sunlight sparkled across the glistening landscape. Driven by curiosity for another surprise, Daria opened the front door to discover a beautifully wrapped box resting on the snow-covered step. It was swathed in soft purple fabric and tied with a shimmering silver ribbon. To her delight, she spotted the Frost King standing nearby, his broad smile illuminating his face as his sleigh awaited under the trees. He appeared even more striking than she remembered, his entire being shimmering in the late winter sun like something divine. Breaking through the momentary enchantment, he gestured toward the box and cheerfully encouraged her. "Go ahead and open it." Standing at the threshold, Daria carefully untied the ribbon and lifted the lid, gasping in pure joy as she beheld what lay within. a magnificent diamond tiara. Never before had she seen a diamond, let alone a crown of such exquisite beauty. All she could do was cover her mouth in astonishment. As she looked up at the Frost King, disbelief clouded her thoughts. How could she possibly accept such a lavish gift? A diamond crown seemed far too extravagant for the daughter of a humble woodcutter. The Frost King stepped closer, his footsteps crunching softly in the snow as he approached her door. With a heavy heart, he confessed that he had fallen for a beautiful girl he had encountered in the forest, and no longer wished to reign over winter in solitude. With a gentle bow and his hand placed over his heart, he asked Daria to be his wife and the beloved Queen of Snow and Ice. For a fleeting moment, she gazed at the exquisite tiara, its brilliance shimmering in the sunlight. Yet deep down, Daria understood that she would accept. It was evident this was her fate, filling her with joy, for the Frost King was truly her perfect counterpart. In a simple yet elegant ceremony held within his ice palace in the land of eternal winter, Daria and the king exchanged their vows. Of course, Victor joined in their celebration, bursting with happiness as any dog could be. Not only did their royal pet indulge in pancakes at every meal, but he also felt right at home amidst the icy splendor of the palace, snug in his thick fur coat. Although she was once a girl who thrived in summer's warmth, the Queen of Snow and Ice occasionally ventured into more temperate lands, bringing with her a refreshing breeze of coolness. So whenever you feel that crisp autumn air or delight in a summer rain shower's chill, remember that she is close by, and rest assured that when the time is right, she and the Frost King will reunite to weave back together the magic of a winter wonderland.